The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, and 47 species filled its seats in a display of power that had governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. Ambassador Chen Wei stood alone at the central podium, a single human surrounded by creatures that considered his species to be nothing more than clever animals who had stumbled upon faster-than-light travel by accident. The Kreth High Commander rose from his throne-like seat, his reptilian scales gleaming under the artificial starlight that illuminated the chamber, and his forked tongue flickered with contempt as he addressed the assembly. "The matter before us is simple," the Kreth declared, his voice booming through translation devices that carried his words to every ear in the room. "The planet called Earth sits upon a junction of 7 hyperspace lanes, and this strategic position is wasted on a species that cannot even defend a single moon." Chen Wei felt his hands tremble with rage, but he kept his face calm as he had been trained to do through 20 years of diplomatic service. "High Commander," Chen Wei spoke with careful precision, "humanity has occupied Earth for over 200,000 years, and we achieved interstellar travel only 50 years ago. But that does not mean we will simply abandon our home." Laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound that came from a dozen different vocal structures, but carried the same message of mockery and dismissal. The Vrax Queen clicked her mandibles together in what passed for amusement among her insectoid species, and she turned her compound eyes toward the human ambassador with something close to pity. "Little mammal," the Queen chittered, "you do not understand your position in this galaxy, and you have no allies, no fleet worth mentioning, and no leverage to negotiate with." Chen Wei looked around the chamber at the representatives of 47 civilizations, and he saw the same expression on every face, regardless of whether that face had scales or fur or chitin. They all looked at him like he was already dead. The Corvan delegate, a massive creature that resembled a bear made of stone, slammed his fist against his voting console and growled his support for the Kreth. "Proposal: we vote for the relocation of humanity," the Corvan announced. "They can have any uninhabited world in Sector 7, and this is generous, and they should accept before our generosity runs out." Chen Wei activated his own console and brought up holographic images of Earth, showing the blue oceans and green continents that had given birth to his species. "This is not just a strategic location," Chen Wei said, his voice rising with emotion he could no longer contain. "This is our home, our history, and every song we have ever sung, and every story we have ever told, and every dream we have ever dreamed began on this world." The Kreth High Commander waved a clawed hand dismissively, and the holographic Earth flickered and died. "Your attachment to one small rock is noted and irrelevant," the Kreth said. "The vote will proceed." Chen Wei watched as the numbers climbed on the display screen, and species after species voted to remove humanity from its home. The final tally appeared in burning red letters: 43 in favor of relocation, 3 abstentions, and 1 vote against humanity stood alone. "You have 30 standard days to evacuate your population," the Kreth announced with satisfaction dripping from every word. "After that time, enforcement measures will begin, and I assure you that we have no desire to harm your species, but we will not hesitate to do so if you resist." Chen Wei gathered his documents and walked toward the exit, but he paused at the door and turned back to face the assembly one last time. "You will regret this decision," Chen Wei said quietly. "Not because we are a threat to you, but because you have made us into one." More laughter followed him out of the chamber, and the door sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing 28 days later. The Kreth Armada arrived at Earth. 3,000 warships darkened the sky above every continent, and their weapons hummed with enough power to crack the planet in half. Admiral Yuki Tanaka commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the carrier Defiance, and she watched her tactical display with growing horror as more and more enemy ships emerged from hyperspace, 200 ships against 3,000. Her first officer whispered, "Admiral, we cannot win this battle." Tanaka gripped the arms of her command chair until her knuckles turned white. And she thought about her children in Tokyo, and her parents in Osaka, and the billions of people looking up at the sky in terror. "We fight anyway," Tanaka ordered. "All ships, engage the enemy, and make them pay for every meter they advance." The Battle of Earth lasted 6 hours. And it was not a battle so much as a slaughter. Human ships fought with desperate courage, ramming enemy vessels when their weapons failed and refusing to surrender even when their hulls burned around them. But courage could not overcome such overwhelming force. And one by one, the human ships died. The Kreth barely noticed the resistance as they began their bombardment. Orbital strikes rained down on the planet like the wrath of angry gods. And cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in pillars of fire. Mars colony fell silent as Kreth troops landed and executed everyone they found, claiming the attack was necessary to prevent future resistance. The lunar defense grid, humanity's pride and greatest achievement in military engineering, lost it exactly 43 minutes before concentrated fire reduced it to expanding clouds of debris. Admiral Tanaka died when the Defiance took a direct hit to its reactor. And her final words were a prayer that someone would survive to remember what had happened here on Earth. The survivors crawled from the ruins of their cities and looked up at the sky filled with alien warships. The Kreth High Commander broadcast his message on every frequency, and his words reached every human ear on the planet. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your colonies are burning, and your world belongs to us now," the Kreth declared. "You have one choice remaining, and that choice is surrender. And if you do not surrender within 24 hours, we will continue the bombardment until nothing remains." In the ashes of Beijing, a young girl named Li Ming held her dying mother and screamed at the sky with rage that burned brighter than the fires around her. In the ruins of New York, an old soldier named James Wright pulled himself from the rubble and stared at the alien ships with hatred that would never fade. In bunkers beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the leaders of what remained of human civilization gathered around flickering screens and faced an impossible choice. President Sarah Okonkwo looked at the faces of her advisors, and she saw fear and grief and despair. But she also saw something else burning beneath the pain. She saw anger. "They think we are finished," President Okonkwo said. "They think they have broken us, and they think we will kneel and accept their chains." She stood and walked to the window that showed only rock and darkness. But in her mind she saw the stars that humanity had dreamed of reaching for so long. "Send the response," President Okonkwo ordered. "Tell the Kreth that Earth does not surrender, and tell them that we will fight until the last human draws their final breath. And tell them that they have made an enemy today that will haunt their species until the stars grow cold." The message went out across the void, and the Kreth laughed once more at the defiance of the doomed. They did not know that beneath the surface of a dozen worlds, in shipyards hidden in the darkness between stars, humanity was about to show the galaxy when it truly meant to make war. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, President Sarah Okonkwo stood before a door that officially did not exist, and the guards who protected it had been told they were guarding an empty storage room. "Open it," the president commanded, and the massive steel barrier slid aside to reveal an elevator that descended 3 kilometers into the earth. General Marcus Stone waited at the bottom, his weathered face showing no surprise at seeing the president in person. And he saluted with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years preparing for this exact moment. "Protocol Rubicon is ready to activate," General Stone reported. "We have been waiting for this day since the program began, and I only wish we did not have to use it." President Okonkwo followed the general through corridors carved from solid granite, passing through checkpoints staffed by soldiers who looked at her with eyes that held both grief and determination. "Show me everything," the president ordered. "I need to understand what we have built in secret." General Stone nodded and led her into a vast underground chamber where holographic displays filled the air with blueprints and battle plans and weapon specifications that would have terrified the Galactic Council if they had known such things existed 50 years ago. When we first made contact with the galaxy, our leaders realized the truth that no one wanted to admit, General Stone explained. The aliens did not see us as equals, and they never would. And eventually, someone would come to take what we have. He gestured at the displays, and images of massive warships appeared before them. We let them believe we were weak, the general continued. Every official human ship was designed to be slightly slower and slightly weaker than the galactic standard. And our visible military was always just small enough to seem pathetic. And all the while we built our real fleet in places no one would ever think to look. President Okonkwo stared at the specifications for vessels that bore no resemblance to anything in the human defense force that had just been destroyed. "How many?" she asked. 500 capital ships hidden in the Orc cloud, General Stone answered. 300 more in classified facilities on Europa, Titan, and Ganymede. And manufacturing capacity to produce another 1,000 within 6 months. The president felt tears forming in her eyes. But they were not tears of grief anymore. What about weapons? She demanded. General Stone smiled for the first time. And it was not a pleasant smile at all. Antimatter warheads capable of cracking moons, he listed. Relativistic kinetic missiles that accelerate to 90% of light speed. And AI-controlled drone swarms that can overwhelm any defense system. And biological agents tailored to specific alien DNA sequences. He paused and met the president's eyes with an expression of cold satisfaction. The galaxy believes we are primitive because we never used weapons of mass destruction on ourselves. General Stone said, they did not understand that we chose not to use them. And we chose not to use them because we knew how terrible they could be. But now someone else has made that choice for us. In another section of the underground complex, Captain Sarah Okonkwo stood before a mirror in her quarters and tried to recognize the woman staring back at her. She had the same name as the president, but no relation. And she had joined the Navy to explore the stars and make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Now she was being given command of a fleet built to burn those same stars. The door chimed, and her old friend Commander James Adebayo entered with a datapad containing her new orders. First Retaliation Fleet. James read aloud, 500 ships under your command, and your mission is to strike directly at the Kreth homeworld while they think we are still dying. Sarah took the datapad and scrolled through the tactical plans that have been developed over decades by strategists who had hoped their work would never be needed. They have no idea we can do this. Sarah realized. They think our FDL technology is too slow to reach their home system for months. James nodded and pulled up a display showing the modifications that had been made to every ship in the secret fleet. Our official ships use throttle drives that match galactic standards. James explained, the real engines are twice as fast. And we can reach the Kreth homeworld in 72 hours while their fleet sits in orbit around Earth, waiting for our surrender. Sarah felt something cold settle into her chest as she understood what she was being asked to do. We are not going to negotiate, she said quietly. We are not going to demand their withdrawal. And we are not going to give them any chance to respond. No, James confirmed. We are going to show them what happens when humanity fights without rules, without mercy, and without any intention of stopping until the enemy is utterly destroyed. On the surface of Earth, the Kreth occupation forces grew comfortable in their victory. They had established bases in the ruins of human cities and begun cataloging the planet's resources for extraction. treating the surviving humans like animals to be managed rather than people to be feared. Commander Dex of the Kreth ground forces walked through what had once been Paris, kicking aside debris that had once been priceless art and architecture. Such a waste, Dex commented to his aide. They built these structures from stone and metal as if they were trying to prove something. And now look at them. His aide, a younger Kreth named Vorn, watched the human survivors being herded into processing camps and felt a flicker of something that might have been doubt. They fought harder than expected. Vorn observed. Even their civilian vessels tried to ram our warships. And I have never seen any species resist so fiercely against such hopeless odds. Commander Dex laughed and slapped his aide on the back with enough force to stagger him. Desperation makes all species fight. Dex dismissed. Once they accept their new place in the galaxy, they will become as docile as any other conquered race. Above them, the Kreth Armada maintained its blockade. And High Commander Kresh reviewed the latest reports from his command ship with growing satisfaction. Earth had gone silent after rejecting the surrender demand, and no further resistance had materialized from any human colony. They are hiding in their holes like frightened animals, Kresh announced to his officers. Within a month, starvation and disease will force them to the surface, and they will beg us for mercy. His tactical officer approached with a minor concern on her face. High Commander, we have lost contact with 3 patrol ships near the outer system, she reported. It is likely just a communication malfunction, but regulations require me to inform you. Kresh waved his hand dismissively and returned his attention to planning the exploitation of Earth's resources. Send a repair drone when you have time, he ordered. Nothing in this system can threaten our patrol ships. He did not know that those 3 ships had been pulled into hyperspace by gravity, trapped and destroyed before they could send a full single distress signal. He did not know that the first retaliation fleet was already moving through routes that human astronomers had mapped decades ago and kept secret from every alien species. He did not know that in secret facilities across a dozen moons, human scientists were completing work on weapons that the galaxy had outlawed centuries ago because they were simply too horrific to use, and he did not know that humanity had just transmitted a message to every surviving human in the galaxy. A message that contained only 2 words: begin Rubicon. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was very, very angry. The Kreth homeworld of Desser Prime had never known war within its own system, and for 3,000 years the reptilian empire had brought destruction to others while their own cities flourished in perfect safety that changed in a single heartbeat when 500 human warships emerged from hyperspace directly above their most populated continent. Captain Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance and watched the tactical display light up with panic signals from a civilization that had never imagined this moment was possible. All weapons free, Sarah commanded, and her voice carried no emotion because she had locked everything human inside herself and become something else entirely. Begin bombardment pattern Alpha. The first retaliation fleet opened fire with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, and the sky above Desser Prime turned into a wall of fire. Antimatter warheads detonated in precise patterns designed to maximize destruction while preventing the Kreth from mounting any organized response. And each explosion consumed a city that had stood for millennia. The Kreth home defense fleet scrambled to respond, but they had been built to intimidate weaker species rather than fight a real war, and their formations crumbled within minutes under the assault of eye-controlled drone swarms that moved faster than any living pilot could react. Admiral Kresh received the news aboard his command ship still orbiting Earth, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt genuine fear. That is impossible, Kresh roared at his communications officer. Humans cannot have reached Desert Prime already, and their drives are too slow. The communications officer showed him the visual feed from his homeworld, and Kresh watched human ships systematically dismantling the only home his species had ever known. "They lied to us," the officer whispered. "Everything they showed us was a deception, and we had no idea what they were truly capable of." Kresh slammed his fist against his command console, hard enough to crack the display, and he began issuing orders with desperate speed. "All ships abandon the Earth blockade," Kresh commanded. "Maximum speed to Desert Prime immediately, and leave nothing behind." The Kreth Armada turned away from Earth and jumped to hyperspace, racing to save their homeworld from the vengeance of a species they had dismissed as primitive animals on the surface of Earth. Commander Dex watched the alien ships disappear from the sky and felt a terrible realization settling into his scales. "They have abandoned us," Dex said to his troops. "The fleet has left us here with no support and no extraction." Before he could issue further orders, the ground beneath his feet began to shake. What the Kreth had believed were ruins suddenly transformed, as hidden panels slid aside and massive weapons. Platforms rose from beneath the rubble of human cities. Railgun emplacements that had been disguised as collapsed buildings powered up with a sound like thunder, and underground silos opened to release swarms of missiles that had been waiting patiently for this moment. The Kreth occupation forces had walked into a trap that had been prepared for decades, and they had no idea how to escape it. Commander Dex tried to call for air support, but every aircraft the Kreth had landed was destroyed in the first 30 seconds of the human. Counterattack surviving humans emerged from bunkers and subway tunnels and basement shelters, and they were not the broken refugees the Kreth had expected. They were armed with weapons that had been hidden before the invasion, and their eyes held the same cold fury that burned in the hearts of their leaders. Vex watched his forces being systematically eliminated by enemies who refused to accept surrender and showed no interest in taking prisoners. "They are not fighting like civilized beings," Vex reported to anyone who might be listening. "They are fighting like animals with nothing left to lose." His transmission cut off as a human soldier put a bullet through his skull, and the Kreth occupation of Earth came to a bloody end in space. Admiral Kresh arrived at Desert Prime to find his world burning and his home defense fleet reduced to scattered debris. Captain Sarah Okonkwo had already positioned her fleet in defensive formations around the planet, and she opened a communication channel to the Kreth commander Admiral Kresh. Sarah spoke with cold precision. "Your invasion fleet is outnumbered and outgunned, and your homeworld is under my control. And I am offering you exactly the same choice you offered humanity." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing, "Surrender unconditionally, or I will continue the bombardment until nothing remains." Kresh stared at the human woman on his view screen and saw no mercy in her eyes, no hesitation, and no indication that she was bluffing about her threat. "You cannot do this," Kresh protested. "The Galactic Council will condemn you for such barbarism, and every species in known space will unite against you." Sarah laughed, and the sound made Kresh's blood run cold. "The Galactic Council voted to exterminate us," Sarah replied. "They watched as you killed billions of our people, and they did nothing. And now you expect us to care about their condemnation?" She terminated the communication and ordered her fleet to resume bombardment. The Battle of Desert Prime lasted 12 hours, and by the end of it, the Kreth Armada had been reduced to less than 300 ships, fleeing in all directions. The survivors carried a message to the galaxy, a message that was also being broadcast on every frequency by human communications networks. The message showed the smoking ruins of Kreth cities and the wreckage of their mighty fleet, and it was accompanied by a simple statement from President Okonkwo to all species who supported the vote against humanity: "The Kreth Dominion is being dismantled for their crimes against our species, and any civilization that provided aid, support, or approval for the attack on Earth has 72 hours to withdraw all forces from human space and issue formal apologies. The message ended with footage of human soldiers raising their flag over the captured Kreth capital city. And the final words hung in space like a death sentence. Those who do not comply will share the fate of the Kreth. 3 species immediately transmitted their apologies and withdrew every ship from anywhere near human territory. The Vrax Collective, whose queen had mocked humanity so confidently in the council chamber, responded with defiance. "We do not negotiate with lesser species," the queen declared. "And we do not fear mammals who have won a single battle through trickery and deception." The Kovan Empire, whose delegate had so eagerly supported the relocation vote, echoed the Vrax position. Humanity's victory was luck, and nothing more. The Kovan Emperor announced, "We will crush them as we have crushed 100 other species who dared to challenge our might." In her office beneath the ruins of Geneva, President Okonkwo received these responses and nodded slowly. "They still do not understand," she said to General Stone. "They still believe this was about survival." She signed the orders that would send human fleets against 2 more civilizations. And her hand did not tremble at all. "This stopped being about survival the moment they killed our children," the president continued. "Now it is about making sure no one ever dares to threaten humanity again." General Stone saluted and went to deliver the orders that would change the galaxy forever. The monster that the Kreth had awakened was just getting started. The Vrax Queen sat upon her throne of woven chitin and watched the reports from her military commanders with growing unease. And for the first time in her 300 years of life, she began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Human fleets had appeared in 7 Vrax systems simultaneously, and they were not fighting like any enemy the collective had ever faced. "They are not trying to capture our worlds," the Supreme General reported, his mandibles clicking with confusion. "They are simply destroying everything they encounter. And they do not stop to take prisoners or negotiate terms. And they do not even respond to our communications." The Queen leaned forward on her throne and demanded more details. "Show me what they are doing." She commanded the holographic display activated. And the Queen watched as human ships deployed swarms of small machines that descended on Vrax industrial centers like Silver Rain. "Those are some kind of automated mining drones," the general explained. "They consume raw materials and use them to build more of themselves. And they have already stripped 3 of our manufacturing moons down to bare rock." The Queen's compound eyes widened as she understood the implications. "They are not just attacking us," she realized. "They are erasing our ability to fight back. And they are doing it faster than we can respond." On the Vrax colony world of Chitara, billions of insectoid civilians looked up at the sky and saw human warships blocking out the light of their sun. Commander James Adebayo led the ground assault, and he felt nothing as his troops advanced through hive structures that had taken centuries to build. "Civilians are attempting to surrender," one of his officers reported. "Standard protocols would require us to accept." James shook his head and kept walking. "The Vrax Queen mocked us when we begged for our lives," James replied. "She laughed when our cities burned. And she called us lesser beings while our children died in the bombardment." He stopped and looked at his officer with eyes that held no warmth at all. "There are no standard protocols anymore," James continued. "There is only the mission, and the mission is to ensure that the Vrax never threaten humanity again." The assault continued, and Chitara fell silent within a week. Meanwhile, the Kovan Empire discovered that their stone-like bodies and legendary toughness meant nothing against human ingenuity. The first Kovan fleet to engage the humans was destroyed by weapons that no one had ever seen before. And the survivors who managed to escape described the attack with voices filled with terror. Their ships fired beams of light that made our armor age. A Corvan captain reported to his emperor. Battleships that had served the Empire for 500 years crumbled to dust in seconds, and we could do nothing to stop it. The Corvan emperor demanded to know how such a weapon was possible, and his scientist has no answers. This technology should not exist, the chief scientist admitted. The energy requirements alone would require a star to power, and yet the humans have miniaturized it to fit on their warships. What the Corvans did not know was that humanity had developed the temporal decay weapon decades ago and immediately classified it as too dangerous for use against other humans. The weapon aged matter at an accelerated rate, turning living beings into dust and metal into rust within moments. And no human leader had ever been willing to deploy it against their own species. But the Corvans were not human. And after what had been done to Earth, the old restrictions no longer applied. The Corvan emperor watched his empire crumble system by system. And he finally understood what the humans were doing. They are not fighting a war, the emperor said to his council. They are conducting an execution, and we are the condemned. He sent a message to the human president requesting negotiations, and he offered complete surrender and reparations and anything else that might stop the destruction. President Okonkwo read the message and considered it for exactly 3 seconds before responding. Your surrender is accepted, she replied. But the reparations I require are not something you can negotiate. The Corvan emperor felt hope flicker in his chest until the president continued. You will provide the locations of every military installation in your empire, and you will decommission every warship in your fleet, and you will accept human oversight of your government for the next 100 years. The emperor began to protest that these terms were too harsh, but the president cut him off. You voted to exterminate my species, she reminded him. These terms are mercy compared to what you deserve, and you have 24 hours to accept them or face the same fate as the Vrax. The Corvan Empire surrendered unconditionally. The Vrax Collective was not given the same opportunity. Human forces had already deployed their most terrible weapon against the Vrax homeworld, and there was no way to stop what was about to happen. The Queen watched in horror as a sphere of self-replicating machines began to enclose her planet, and she finally understood that the humans had never intended to negotiate with her species. They are building a cage around our world, the Supreme General reported, his voice filled with despair. The machines are consuming everything in orbit and using the materials to expand, and within a month, they will have sealed us inside completely. The Queen tried to send messages to the Galactic Council begging for intervention, but no one responded to her calls. The other species had seen what happened to those who opposed humanity, and they had decided that the Vrax were not worth dying for. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as reports of human atrocities spread across every world, and 47 species sat in terrified silence as ambassador. Chen Wei took the floor. Chen Wei looked different than he had during the vote against humanity, and his face bore scars from the bombardment of Beijing, and his eyes held a coldness that made even the most ancient council members uncomfortable. You could have stopped this, Chen Wei said quietly. When the Kreth proposed our extermination, you could have voted against it. And when they began their assault, you could have intervened. But you did nothing. He walked to the center of the chamber and looked at each delegate in turn. Now you want to condemn us for defending ourselves, Chen Wei continued. You want to call us monsters for doing what you forced us to do. And you want the galaxy to unite against the species you tried to murder. The council chambers remained silent, and no one dared to speak. Humanity has demands, Chen Wei announced. And these demands are not negotiable. He listed them one by one. Complete reparations for the destruction of human colonies, permanent seats on the Galactic Council with veto power, the unconditional surrender of the Kreth Dominion, recognition of human sovereignty over all captured territories, and a formal apology from every species that voted for relocation. You have 48 hours to accept these terms. Chen Wei concluded. If you do not, humanity will consider the council to be a hostile entity, and we will respond accordingly. He walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response, and the doors closed behind him with a sound that echoed like a funeral bell. The vote was unanimous, and every demand was met within 12 hours. No species wanted to be the next example of what happened when humanity was pushed too far. 1 year had passed since the Kreth Armada first appeared above Earth, and the galaxy had become a very different place. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at a window in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters and watched human ships patrol the sky above New York. And he remembered the day when alien warships had filled that same sky with fire. The memorial dedication begins in 1 hour. His aide reminded him. Representatives from 32 species have confirmed attendance. Chen Wei nodded, but did not turn away from the window. And his reflection showed a man who had aged decades in just 12 months. They come because they are afraid, Chen Wei said quietly. Not because they mourn our dead, and not because they regret what they did, but because they fear what we might do if they stay away. The memorial stood in the center of what had once been Central Park, and it bore the names of 3 billion humans who had died during the invasion and the war that followed. 3 billion names carved into black granite that stretched for kilometers. And every day new visitors came to trace their fingers over the letters and weep for what had been lost. President Okonkwo delivered the dedication speech to an audience of humans and aliens who stood in respectful silence. And her words carried across the rebuilt city on speakers that reached every corner. We gather today to remember those who fell, the president said. The children who never grew up, the parents who never came home, and the dreamers who never saw their dreams fulfilled. She paused and looked at the alien delegates standing nervously at the edge of the crowd. We also gather to acknowledge what we have become, she continued. A year ago, we were a peaceful species that wanted nothing more than to explore the stars and make friends among them. And today, we are the most feared civilization in known space. The president's voice hardened as she delivered her final message. We did not choose this path, and it was chosen for us by those who thought we were too weak to matter. But we will not apologize for walking it, and we will not forget why we had to become this way. In the Galactic Council chamber, the mood was very different from the arrogant confidence that had filled it during the vote against humanity. Species that had laughed at Ambassador Chen Wei now fell silent when he entered the room. And delegates who had dismissed human concerns now rushed to support every proposal humanity made. The council had become a place where fear ruled instead of power. And everyone knew who they were afraid of. Chen Wei took his seat in the human delegation section, which now occupied the central position that had once belonged to the Kreth. And he reviewed the agenda for the day's session. The first item is the proposal for protected status for developing species. His aide informed him. It has the support of 39 delegations and no opposition. Chen Wei smiled without warmth and nodded his approval. They are learning, he observed. They are finally understanding that the weak deserve protection rather than exploitation. And it only took the destruction of 2 empires to teach them this lesson. The proposal passed unanimously, as every proposal supported by humanity passed unanimously, and no one dared to raise objections or request amendments on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance. Captain Sarah Okonkwo watched her crew perform their duties with the quiet efficiency of veterans who had seen too much. She had been promoted to admiral after the war, but she still commanded her original ship because she could not bear to leave the vessel that had carried her through the darkest days of human history. Admiral, her communications officer reported. We have received the weekly status update from the Kreth refugee zone. Sarah accepted the report and reviewed the contents with an expression that revealed nothing of her thoughts. The Kreth as a civilization no longer existed, and their homeworld remained under human quarantine, while their surviving population, scattered across refugee camps on worlds that had agreed to accept them, but humanity had also established programs to ensure the Kreth refugees were treated humanely, with access to food and medicine and education and all the things that civilization required. Condition of refugees remained stable. Sarah read aloud. No reports of mistreatment or deprivation. And integration programs are proceeding according to schedule. Her first officer, Commander Marcus Webb, raised an eyebrow at this news. We destroyed their empire and scattered their people across the galaxy, Marcus observed. And now we spend resources making sure they are comfortable? Sarah turned to look at him with eyes that held both exhaustion and determination. We could have exterminated them completely, she replied. We had the power and the justification and the anger to wipe their species from existence. But we chose not to do that. She returned her attention to the stars visible through the bridge windows. That choice is what separates us from what they tried to make us. Sarah continued. We became monsters to survive, but we do not have to remain monsters forever. On a distant world called the Sara Academy, a young Varelian cadet named Kira sat in a history classroom and listened to her instructor lecture about the event that had changed galactic civilization. The instructor, an elderly Kellian named Professor Torx, had witnessed the human-Kreth war from a neutral observation post, and his scales still turned pale when he discussed what he had seen before the humans. The galaxy operated on a simple principle, Professor Torx explained. The strong took what they wanted from the weak, and the weak accepted their fate or died. He activated a holographic display showing images of the war, burning cities on Earth, the destruction of the Kreth Armada, and the systematic dismantling of two empires by a species that had been dismissed as primitives. The humans changed everything, the professor continued. They showed us that weakness can be a disguise, and patience can be a weapon. And even the most powerful empire can fall if it underestimates the wrong enemy. Kira raised her hand with a question that had been bothering her since the lecture began. Professor, why did the galaxy fall silent after the human counterattack? She asked. Other species have won wars before without causing this kind of fear. Professor Torx considered the question carefully before answering. And when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through history. Because the humans did not fight to win, the professor explained. They fought to ensure that no one would ever dare to threaten them again. And they succeeded beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. He zoomed the display to show a map of human space, which had grown from a single solar system to encompass thousands of worlds and was still expanding. 50,000 warships patrol human borders, the professor listed. Defense networks protect every colony, and their military technology advances faster than any other species can match. And yet they have not attacked anyone who did not attack them first. Kira frowned as she tried to understand the contradiction. So they are peaceful? She asked. Professor Torx shook his head slowly. They have two states, he replied. Dormant and apocalyptic, and there is nothing in between. And the galaxy learned very quickly that waking the dormant version produces the apocalyptic one. The lecture ended, and Kira walked out of the classroom with new understanding of why her parents had taught her to always speak respectfully when humans were nearby in the rebuilt city of Geneva. Ambassador Chen Wei met with a group of human children who had been born after the war, and he listened to their questions about a conflict they knew only from history lessons. Ambassador Chen, a young girl asked, "Do you think we will ever be friends with the other species?" Chen Wei knelt down to meet her eyes and considered his answer carefully. "I think friendship must be earned through trust," he said. "And trust takes time to build, especially after what happened between us." He stood and looked out at the city that had risen from the ashes of war. But I also think that we did not fight and die just so we could spend forever being afraid of each other. Chen Wei continued. We fought so that our children could have a future. And part of that future has to include peace. The children nodded solemnly. Too young to understand the full weight of his words, but old enough to sense their importance. That night, Chen Wei attended a private dinner with several alien ambassadors who had requested an informal meeting. And he sat across from beings who represented species that had voted for humanity's extermination. We wanted to extend our personal condolences for your losses, the Pellerin ambassador said nervously, and to express our hope that relations between our species can improve over time. Chen Wei sipped his wine and studied the ambassador with an expression that gave nothing away. Your species abstained from the vote, Chen Wei observed. You did not vote against us. But you also did not vote to protect us. The ambassador's feathers ruffled with anxiety as he tried to formulate a response. We were afraid, the ambassador admitted. The Kreth were powerful, and we thought resistance would be futile. And we never imagined that humanity could... He trailed off. Unable to complete the sentence, could fight back? Chen Wei finished for him. Could defend ourselves? Could become something that makes the old powers look like children playing with toys? The ambassador nodded miserably. Chen Wei set down his wine glass and spoke with a calm that was more frightening than any display of anger. Learn from what happened, Chen Wei advised.